And I was just talking earlier how sauna is the only Finnish word in English language. And when you look at the sauna research in terms of the academic research, there's overwhelming research that if you have regular saunas, and this research was done mostly in Finland, that it reduces all-cause mortality. It actually stops you dying if you have regular saunas. It reduces heart attack, a stroke, Alzheimer's disease, pneumonia, respiratory disease, cold and flu. All of these are reduced if you have regular sauning. But in the medical literature, they talk about the sauna. They don't talk about the cold experience. Yet in Finland, when you have a sauna, it's taken for granted that you open the door and outside it's freezing and you go into a snowdrift or a lake or a river and you balance the heat with the cold. And if you unpack that sort of physiologically, what's happening is when you're in the heat, you vasodilate. Your body opens up all the external blood vessels. Your heart has to pump a lot harder because there's less resistance in the blood vessels, and there's more space in the blood vessels for the heart to pump into. So your heart actually has to work harder. It's a really good cardiovascular workout. Of course, when you sweat, and as long as you're hydrated well, you're sweating well, and that's a great detoxification just in the sweating. But when you vasodilate like that in a relaxed situation where you're actually just lying down and relaxing, it means you're not making new metabolic waste products. So your muscles aren't actually working and creating lactic acid. And if you've got any inflammation in your body anywhere, those blood vessels dilate and those inflammatory fluids get flushed. So that's a really positive action. But then when you go into the cold, you then vasoconstrict. And all that blood that's flushed out, all the toxicity in your periphery, all that blood gets forced through your internal organs. It gets put into your core to protect you vasoconstrict your periphery, that blood goes through your core. So that blood goes through your liver and kidneys, which makes you want to pee and eliminate, but it also detoxifies all those inflammatory fluids and all those metabolic waste products. So it's a really great flush. And it's like I call it like a bicep curl for your vascular system. You're opening up your blood vessels and you're shutting down your blood vessels. And that opening and closing keeps your blood vessels elastic. And you've got 100,000 kilometers of blood vessels in your body that are all lined by smooth muscle that's not under your voluntary control. But you can sort of control it by controlling your external environment, and that's using hot and cold. And the other thing that I'm really big into is the idea of hormesis, which is, stress that actually makes you stronger by having to adapt to it. And both hot and cold are potentially life-threatening stressors. If you're too hot or too cold for too long, you're going to die. But there are also stresses that you can be very in control of. So I can have an ice bath here and a sauna there. I can get really cold, but I know at any time I can get out of the ice bath and hop into the sauna or the hot tub or the steam room, and I can warm up. So it's fully under my control. And a lot of people are really scared by that. And there are cases of people falling into cold water and dying straight away from cold shock. And they call it dry drowning because their lungs aren't full of fluid. And what happens, and typically it often happens when someone's in the North Sea, on a ship, and they fall overboard and they're suddenly in freezing cold water and they're panicking. And if they're a little bit older, their heart's a bit brittle, they don't have a good cardiac rhythm, they have this massive sympathetic nervous system drive, massive adrenaline, they basically panic, and that throws their heart into an abnormal rhythm and they have a heart attack. And that's what kills them. It's not the cold that kills them, it's the panic. And now that's very different though if you're in control, voluntarily going into an ice bath and controlling your breath. Because when you go into extreme cold, you naturally, you have this gasp reflex. So it makes you, gasp, and then you hyperventilate. That's a natural response. And if you're panicking and you're in cold water, that'll force you to drown quicker because you're going to start gulping in cold water. It forces your heart to go into abnormal rhythms, and you get this panic response. But if you're, and that's actually the response, it's you reproducing the body chemistry and the breathing pattern of anxiety and trauma. Because that panic response that cold water induces happens when you're, in a really extreme situation. So for some people that have had past trauma, or they've got PTSD, or they've had anxiety, you can actually trigger that anxiety. But you can trigger it in a very controlled way that they can then overcome that, which can be really therapeutic. But if you're doing it, just forcing people into it, it can actually be traumatic. So you've got to be really careful. And really, people are exploring the edge of their own tolerance. And I talk about how to be comfortably uncomfortable, or how to get to the point where you get what I call forced mindfulness. It's when your body demands the attention of your mind, saying, hey, we're really cold, get out of here, or no, hey, it's really hot, get out of here. And at that point where your mind and body are on the same page, that's essentially yoga. That's union. That's, you know, mind and body and breath are all connected. That everyone's different, and your tolerance will change day to day, and how you're feeling, and what your mood is, and what you ate yesterday, and whether you're worrying about stuff, and how present you can be in the moment. And of course, the breath is the connection between the body and the mind. So controlling your breath is a really key aspect of any hot or cold experience. And when you're in the heat, you naturally hyperventilate because it just you pant and your heart's working harder. So it's actually a really good cardiovascular exercise you can do without stressing your joints. So for people who are overweight or they've got osteoarthritis and they can't go for a run or bike ride or something, they can sit in a sauna and have a really good cardiovascular workout. And that's probably the most evidence in terms of medical evidence in terms of the benefits for saunaing is for heart disease. Yeah, people think, oh, maybe, you know, it's going to stress my heart and it's dangerous. So while there's a really great wealth of evidence for the benefits of saunaing for people with heart disease,